big one is here. The final moment of the season. It's all been building up to this. And of course, we are going to set you up with all the key stats, all the key facts to help you set those lineups, get those bets in order, and of course, bring home some money. Tom, we're going to start this matchup. We're going to start on the Chiefs side of the ball. What are you looking at, first of all, when the Chiefs have got the ball on offense?
So I think this game is so fascinating from a number of levels. I think that a lot of people were fatigued by the idea of this matchup. And coming out of conference championship weekend, I just felt like these are the two best teams that were left. They were the two teams who played better that weekend. And it gives us a really fascinating matchup. The Eagles have been so good at slowing down the big plays this year, but that's not what the Chiefs want to do. The Chiefs are willing to dink and dunk. You know, we've been saying all season that this version of the Chiefs, it's more boring than we're used to. But it hasn't really mattered for the Chiefs because this is a team who's won like practically every meaningful game this year. The only one they lost to was the Bills in week 11. The week 18 game against the Broncos simply does not count because the Chiefs rested so many players. And the Chiefs are just kind of rounding into form at the right time. You look at Patrick Mahomes, who had a season high in EPA as well as success rate per drop back against the Bills last time out. He looked good. The week before, Travis Kelce looked good. The only part of this offense that doesn't particularly look good is the running game. And I think that's somewhere where you can rightly have a lot of concern this week because you've got Isaiah Pacheco, who's seen his workload decrease for several straight weeks, down to the point where he had, 4 touches in the last game. Then Kareem Hunt, both of them are averaging under 3.6 yards per carry. The Eagles' run defense is a good run defense. They've ranked in the top 5 in run defense DVOA all season, haven't given up huge amounts of points to anyone. So I don't feel confident taking a punt on either Pacheco, which is a real punt. Like his rushing line this week is only 23 yards, I think, on drafters. Meanwhile, Kareem Hunt is set to about 45. I don't feel particularly great about either of them. Maybe Kareem Hunt is a little more touchdown equity. But again, I'm just not feeling amazing about it. I think you can probably take some shots at Samaje Perine for receiving work if you think that the Eagles are playing well through this one. And the Eagles are missing Nakobe Dean. He's opened up the middle of the field. Potentially you could get running backs, tight ends, slot receivers on that area where they're running out replacements. The replacement is Oren Burks, who has allowed 21 of 23 targets to be completed since becoming a full-time player in that role.
And the interesting thing with Oren Burks is he was the player that came in for Dre Greenlaw for the 49ers last year. So it's back-to-back Super Bowls against the Chiefs, and he was certainly picked on last year. I feel sorry for him. He's going to get picked on again.
Well, that's it. And like you look at the Chiefs, we know over the years that Andy Reid coming off a bye week is excellent at planning, excellent at identifying weaknesses. And that's what the Chiefs are. They're surgical. I think that we're going to see very much that kind of approach from them. Like the Eagles, they've forced opponents to have the second quickest time to throw in the NFL this year. Well, Mahomes, when he's under 2.5 seconds to throw, has the second best off-target throw rate, like the second most accurate balls in those situations, 9th in completion over expected. Yeah, loads of good stats for him. When he's holding the ball, that's been where things have kind of gone off the boil for the Chiefs this year. So I think if you can dink and dunk on them, it's going to be useful. And I think that stands to benefit Travis Kelce, who before last week's disappointing matchup where he had under 20 yards, he was on a run of 14 straight games in the playoffs with 70 or more yards. I think that that's an area they need to be targeting a lot. I think that you can also, like I alluded to, I would be looking at the pass catching running backs slightly more than Pacheco. Then I would also consider guys like Xavier Worthy and Juju Smith-Schuster, the guys who can do a bit of damage near the line of scrimmage. I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, well, Xavier Worthy is the guy breaking downfield, but like the Chiefs keep designing stuff for him near the line of scrimmage as well. So I would be in on those guys. Hollywood Brown has had a catch on each of the Chiefs' last 3 opening drives. Meanwhile, DeAndre Hopkins, it's just not happening, is it? Like, you look at what he's done over the last 2 playoff games, he's run around on 24 of Mahomes' 67 dropbacks in the playoffs. Worthy 59, Marquise Brown 49, Juju Smith-Schuster has more at 35. So I'm struggling to get on board with DeAndre Hopkins, particularly when you look at the strength of this Eagles defense. They're excellent on the outside. They're excellent when you're talking about like downfield. And that's kind of what DeAndre Hopkins has been reduced to a little bit. So I'm not really feeling him, but the rest of the Chiefs offense, I feel pretty good about. And I think that there are going to be ways which the Chiefs can get at this team in terms of how I think that you want to like really approach it. It's taking the mindset of, okay, are the Chiefs going to win this game? Well, yeah, okay. What does that look like? It looks like Mahomes dinking and dunking it, because they're probably not going to be able to run the ball particularly well. So instead, they'll take the short passes. And which of the guys are the possession receivers? And that's pretty much where I lean on the Chiefs. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, I'm very much the same. I think, look, you could argue Vic Fangio's 0-8 versus Patrick Mahomes. We know what Vic Fangio's going to do with the defense. Does he try and get creative and kind of change things? I don't think that's going to happen. We know what Vic Fangio is. We know what he's going to do. He's going to sit in those 2 high shells, and he's going to force the Chiefs to run, 8, 9, 10, 11 play drives to try and score. And I agree with you. Every time I look at this Chiefs offense, it's coming back to the slot guys, Travis Kelce, Xavier Worthy on those, crossing routes, manufactured touches. And I think that's where I want to attack. I'm a little bit intrigued by Juju Smith-Schuster, just because I think that the Eagles as a defense struggle against the slot. I think that the Chiefs are going to want bigger bodies on the field. I don't think we're going to necessarily see huge amounts of 11 personnel with Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, and Xavier Worthy. I think we're going to see Juju Smith-Schuster rolled in. I think we're going to see Noah Gray on the field. I think we're going to see Justin Watson on the field. And I think that some of those bigger bodies that, are going to help in the run game, that's what we're going to want to see. So I think, to me, it's Travis Kelce, it's Xavier Worthy, and then sprinkling in Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't really like the run game. I think Kareem Hunt, I just don't know. You're basically praying for a touchdown here, aren't you? So I think, I'd rather go elsewhere, and I don't think you can trust Isaiah Pacheco. So, for me, I kind of agree with you. It's those intermediate areas of the field, guys that are going to attack over the middle of the field and basically leave the external weapons in the running game well alone.
Yeah, and obviously, like if Kareem Hunt or any running back not named Saquon Barkley scored 2 rushing touchdowns this week, and you're playing any form of DFS, that's going to blow the slate wide open. But on screen there, we've got the stat. Only 5 running backs have had rushing touchdowns against the Eagles this entire season, including the playoffs. None of them went for 2. So it's hard for me to believe that suddenly Kareem Hunt is going to do what nobody else has done. The Chiefs are particularly creative around the goal line, so I don't think there's reliant on a running back within the 5-yard line as like a team like Baltimore with Derrick Henry is. Just going back to you, Juju Smith-Schuster point, he had 2 catches for 60 yards against the Bills. The first one came on the opening drive of the first half, and then the second on the opening drive of the second half. So it seemed like they really were making a point in those scripted plays when they first come back out that they wanted to get the ball to Juju Smith-Schuster, and it worked. So it's a bit of a dart throw, but I don't completely hate it. And then just a couple of quick stats on the wide receivers. Xavier Worthy has had over 5 or more targets in every game since week 11, been over 45 receiving yards in 8 of those 9 games played, with 5 touchdowns in that time. Then Marquise Hollywood Brown been over 45 receiving yards in each of the 2 regular season games he played before the playoffs. He's seen 7 targets, 3 receptions, 35 yards in the 2 playoff games. I think the way this Chiefs team is set up, it feels like we understand and we know what the pecking order is across the board. It's going to be whether we get a wild card touchdown from somebody like Justin Watson or somebody like Noah Gray, who, for all the reasons we're saying that Travis Kelce can smash, maybe Noah Gray is the guy who gets a touchdown, and then it makes a massive difference. And let's not forget that we're only a couple of years ago from the Super Bowl where the Chiefs played Ring a Ring of Roses before taking a snap. Andy Reid will get creative. He loves to cook up stuff for this sort of stuff. So I think it's predictable to an extent, and where it's unpredictable will be the difference in how you win a DFS contest.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, moving across to the other side of the ball, the Eagles on offense. Now, I don't know if you heard, Saquon Barkley is playing in this game, and it's his birthday. It feels like it's all I've read and all I've heard is about Saquon Barkley this week. Are you in on Saquon Barkley having a massive game, or do you think this could be a bad end to a fantastic season?
Well, the Chiefs haven't allowed a 100-yard rushing performance in any of their 18 last playoff games dating back to 2019. So if the Eagles are going to win this game, I think it has to be on the back of Saquon Barkley breaking that streak. So I think the matchup works because where the Chiefs' run defense finished the season was 8th in rush yards allowed per game, 7th in yards per carry allowed, 3rd in explosive run rate allowed, 7th in yards before contact per rush allowed, and 2nd in yards after contact per rush allowed. We know how explosive Saquon Barkley is. He's had, I think it was something like 14 runs of 20 plus miles an hour this season. No other running back had more than 6. We know how many games he's just gone over that 100 rushing yards. Like, I think you look back over the course of the season, he's been over the course of the last 11 games, Barkley's been over 105 rushing yards in 9 of his last 11 games, been over 150 in 3 of the last 5 games. So I think he can get at this Chiefs run defense. Now, obviously, the Chiefs defensive line is a hell of a unit, and they'll be looking to bring pressure and stop the run game from being established. And that'll work on 2 levels if they can do that, because Jalen Hurts under pressure this year, Sharp Football pointed this out on Twitter a couple of days ago, the Jalen Hurts when pressured versus when clean, he out of 37 quarterbacks when pressured, he ranks 37th in success rate, 37th in EPA per attempt, 33rd in sack rate, and 32nd in yards per attempt. So the Chiefs' defensive line is going to be massive for this game. I do think we'll see Jalen Hurts trying to run the ball a little bit more. He's had 9 carries for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on designed runs in the playoffs. Compare that with the rest of the season combined, where he only had 208 rushing yards. They are using him more, and that's not just cheek sneaks. And we're like, I'm not sure that I kind of believe that Jalen Hurts is going to slice and dice the Chiefs through the passing game. We've talked about it plenty. They've put him in a box a little bit this year, and he might be having career highs in things like completion rate and success rate and touchdown percentage, but it's coming at the expense of overall passing yards. It's been efficient, but it hasn't been creative. It hasn't been particularly impressive. The Chiefs play a lot of too high safety coverage, which leaves more of the middle of the field open. And Hurts against too high, his completion rate is only 66%, which is lower than his season average. 6.5 yards per attempt, which is, that's not super low, but it's also not impressive at all. I think that we'll see Jalen Hurts dinking and dunking plenty, and I think that's going to benefit Dallas Goedert, who is not somebody who anybody's sneaking in here. Like, if you go look at receiving yard lines since they opened, Dallas Goedert has steadily creeped up. Goedert, since he returned from injury, he's had games with 7 for 85, 4 for 56, 4 for 47, and 4 for 55. That was a game without Jalen Hurts. And he's at 29% targets per route run. With all 3 healthy options for the Eagles this year in terms of pass catchers, it has been Dallas Goedert who's been the number 2 in there. Like AJ Brown, 26% target share, Dallas Goedert 21.6, and Devonta Smith 19.8. So I think there'll be plenty of people who want to cram in Dallas Goedert as well as Saquon Barkley, as well as Travis Kelce into their lineups. I do quite like Devonta Smith. He said, I think 3 career games. Andrew Erickson of Fancy Pros put this out on Twitter earlier. 3 career games against the Chiefs, and he's been over 90 receiving yards in all of them. And when the Eagles need to pass, they seem to push the ball downfield, and it goes the way of Devonta Smith slightly more than it does to AJ Brown. Devonta Smith has been over 45 receiving yards in like 4 of the last 5 games. Meanwhile, AJ Brown, it's so volatile. Last week, it felt like because they were stomping the Commanders, that they made a point of trying to get the ball more often to AJ Brown. It resulted in like 8 for 96 and a touchdown, which is great. But yeah, I don't mind taking shots at Devonta Smith. I can't get away from the fact that if you are building a fantasy lineup on any platform this week, it is so hard to avoid putting Saquon Barkley in there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the clear and obvious play, isn't it? And I feel like, if you're building multiple lineups, you've got to have at least one, if not two, probably multiple that have got Saquon Barkley. If it's a captain lineup or anything, you probably need to sneak him in because, let's be honest, he's the player that's most likely to win this game and in terms of win the matchup for you. The thing I keep coming back to is I just think the Chiefs are basically going to dare Jalen Hurts to win the game. I think they're going to say, we don't want Saquon Barkley to win this game. We're going to load the box. We're going to try and make life difficult for him, and we're going to put the game in Jalen Hurts' hand because I think that's, the weak link on this potent Eagles offense. And I think that they're going to try and go one-on-one outside and, try and force Jalen Hurts to complete over the middle of the field. We know he doesn't. I've been incredibly critical of Jalen Hurts all year. He played the best football I've seen him play in the championship game. He was fantastic. But can he do it back-to-back weeks? Can he sit in the pocket? Can he complete those passes over the middle of the field that we know he doesn't want to do? Yeah, he can throw one-on-ones on the outside, but can he complete between the hashes over the middle of the field when the game's on the line? And I think that's what Spagnuolo's going to say. Jalen Hurts, you've got to come and win this. I think that the Dallas Goedert shout is fantastic. He's got a chance to be the leading receiver in the playoffs. It's currently Dyami Brown at the moment. I think Dallas Goedert is a really sneaky play. He's one of my best values on the slate, and I really, really like his potential for kind of being that sneaky game winner. Because as I said, I think that's where the Chiefs are going to almost give up the middle of the field and say, Jalen Hurts, we know you don't want to throw here, so we're going to give it up and almost dare you to throw over the middle.
Yeah, one thing related to that with Jalen Hurts, we know how incredibly impressive he's been in terms of scoring touchdowns. Like for the last 3 years, he's had double-digit touchdowns in each campaign, something like 42 touchdowns across that point. And a big part of it is the tush push, cheek sneak, whatever you want to call it. Well, last week, the Chiefs, they stopped the Bills and Josh Allen on 3 QB sneaks. Next Gen Stats said that is the most runs stuffed by a defense against QB sneaks in a game since they started charting stats in 2016. If they can replicate that against the Eagles, which we know that the Eagles do it better than anybody. The Bills do it very well, but the Eagles do it even better. If they can stop that against the Eagles, it is going to be absolutely huge for them because it just means that we're going to see the Eagles most likely being less effective around the goal line and on fourth downs, those plays that you have to have. And if you turn the ball over in those situations, the Chiefs, they're just so clinical that I think that's going to be the difference in the game.
And also, let's not forget, Cam Jurgens, Landon Dickerson, they were seriously injured in that championship game. Yes, they've had 2 weeks off to recover, but I don't think you suddenly get over a back injury and it looks like a fairly serious knee injury. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how they cope up front to early on in this game because it's going to be a big storyline as the game moves on.
Well, Rich, where's your which team are you going with to win the game? I feel like we've got to put our cards on the table here and say what we're going with.
I'm going Chiefs by 10. I feel very confident that the Eagles are the best team. I think the Eagles have got the best offensive line, the best running back, the best wide receivers, the best defense. But Patrick Mahomes plays for the Chiefs, and yeah, I can't bet against him. And I think it's going to be Andy Reid with 2 weeks to prepare against the defense that isn't necessarily going to disguise things, isn't necessarily going to throw something out the box at him. I feel really confident in Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes being able to pick apart. So, yeah, I think Chiefs by 10.
Yeah, I'm with you on the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs are only favored by 1. I think this game is going under the 49.0 over under. I think that it's going to be closer than that. And I think that one of the reasons I give it to the Chiefs is because the coordinator that I have the most faith in this one is Spags. Vic Fangio has done a great job this year. But you look at the impressive players for the Eagles in the secondary. They're rookies, man. They're counting on some rookies who are going into their first Super Bowl. They've had some big moments through the playoffs and have played well. But I'm just siding with the Chiefs. They know how. I mean, Christ, 3rd Super Bowl in a row. This is a team who fully understands what is required this week. And I just think that the Chiefs have enough know-how that they can get this done. Probably not as much as by 10, but I think that the final drive probably won't matter.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And my favorite prop, if you're looking for props, Patrick Mahomes rushing attempts. I'm hammering the over. I think that there's going to be some nil downs at the end of the game that could creep that line up a bit. I think the over under is about 5.5 at the moment.
Well, Mahomes, he had 11 for 43 and 2 touchdowns against the Bills in his 20 playoff appearances. He's had 6 or more rush attempts in 50% of them, rushed 41 or more yards in 7 of them. So very much in on Mahomes and his rushing totals across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're going to move across to the Fantasy Game Day section of the week. If you haven't checked out Fantasy Game Day and you are situated in the UK, go ahead, download the app and use code TFS23 for a free second entry when you deposit. Tom, let's start with the Chiefs. I've listed as many players as I can. I thought we're going to have to get deep here. How are you likely to approach this game? We're looking at a ballers matchup. You've got a captain that scores 1.5. It's kind of a traditional showdown slate. Are you leaning more towards kind of a stars and scrubs approach, trying to find a couple of 2,200 players that you can sneak into a lineup and, still load up with a Saquon Barkley or a Mahomes or a Worthy? Or are you going to try and balance it out more, do you think?
I think it is probably going to be more stars and scrubs at times. I think that in this game, we know what the offenses are for the most part. We know the Chiefs don't have a great run game, as we've talked about. So it's looking at Mahomes, Worthy, Kelsey, Hollywood Brown as the guys we can count on. On the Eagles, it'll be Saquon Barkley, possibly Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, some kind of mix of that. But where you're going to win is by finding the probably 2 value plays, and whether that means going all the way down to stone cold minimum plays or finding someone a little higher up, like DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, 2,600 is incredibly cheap for DeAndre Hopkins. I talked about before why I don't particularly want to play DeAndre Hopkins, but if he gets a touchdown in a 1-game slate, a touchdown, it makes so much difference. I do like Samaje Perine, though, if you are building lineups with Saquon Barkley as your captain, saying that Saquon Barkley is going to run all over the Chiefs and he's going to rack up the most points of anyone in this game, then we're probably going to see some hurry-up drills and some pass-down work for Samaje Perine. He's been over like double-digit yardage, receiving yardage in, I think, every game but 2 this year. I think that Noah Gray is somebody who has touchdown equity in terms of his typical performance. It's been a little volatile at times. I know there was a point where people were starting to think that Noah Gray was taking over from Travis Kelce, but then you get into the playoffs and Travis Kelce does the kind of Travis Kelce things, and Noah Gray has combined for 13 yards across the 2 playoff games. You go back, and the last time that he actually had 20 or more yards was the 15th of December. He did have a nice run where he scored 5 touchdowns in 5 games, but yeah, it just seems like he's less involved now we're in the playoffs. So I don't mind taking shots on Noah Gray or Juju Smith-Schuster, but it's knowing that the floor on those guys is a stone cold 0.
Yeah, I think you're not going to want to add them into every single lineup that you're building, but I think those are the 2 guys that I'm intrigued at the bottom value. I think that Noah Gray, Juju, I talked about it earlier. I think the Chiefs are going to attack that middle of the field, and those are 2 names that definitely stand out. I think for me, Travis Kelce at £4,000, he's the value on the slate. I really like that price. I think he's got the ceiling outcomes, and I think at £4,000, that's pretty decent value. I've got a tactical question for you here, though, Tom. If you're building a lineup, have you got a ideal balance between one side and the other? Obviously, we've got 5 players to pick from. How heavy would you go? Would you look at a 4-1 potentially in this sort of matchup?
I think it's completely fine with the way that Saquon Barkley scores points. If you're captain Saquon Barkley, to then just make every other pick a Chiefs pick and say that the Chiefs are having a pass with volume. And, in that narrative, you're counting on Saquon Barkley to really rack up the yardage. You're talking 150 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns kind of day. And then saying that Mahomes and Kelsey get there on volume alone, whilst the Eagles aren't really doing anything of note. It's not saying that Travis Kelce's going to have 30 points or Patrick Mahomes is going to have 30 points. I mean, this is an Eagles defense that's allowed one 300 passing yard game all season, and that was in week 4. So you don't necessarily need that. It's just saying for the lineup that you're building, what's getting you the most points to build around Saquon Barkley. If you were leaning more into an idea that the Chiefs are in control of the game, then I don't mind going Travis Kelce, maybe one more pass catcher, and saying that Patrick Mahomes doesn't get there through sheer volume and all that, and that he ends up with the equivalent of, say, 16 fantasy points, 17 fantasy points, but it's not enough to make him pay off at 6,600. Instead, you take Travis Kelce and Xavier Worthy, or Travis Kelce and Hollywood Brown, and then on the other side, you stack things with the Eagles where you think the points fall there.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Tyler points out in the chat, he's saying, with this sort of lineup, there's only so many players you've got to pick for. You've got to get slightly funky. You've got to get comfortable being uncomfortable and try and get some random players in there that could pop up for a touchdown. Because if you get one of these stone cold minimums, Samaje Perine touchdown, that's a game breaker. And the same with Noah Gray, Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm moving across to the Eagles. Any interest in the stone cold minimums here? We've got Kenneth Gainwell, Grant Calcaterra, Jahan Dotson, all 2,200. Do any of them tickle your fancy, Tom?
I mean, Kenneth Gainwell is always going to be good for those 2-minute drives towards the end. If you're confident in the Chiefs, then maybe you can write in a bit more passing game work for Kenneth Gainwell. Will Shipley really struggles to get any work whilst Kenneth Gainwell's healthy, so I don't mind that. Dallas Goedert, we've already talked about. 3,800 is incredible value. I think the lineups I want to build this week are probably going to feature both Travis Kelce and Dallas Goedert. It just seems too easy to get them both in there. In terms of the values at the bottom, Grant Calcaterra has kind of faded away now that we've got Dallas Goedert back to full health. I think that you look at Jahan Dotson, and it's kind of like, he's popping up. Like Grant Calcaterra in the last 2 playoff games doesn't even have a target. Jahan Dotson, he's kind of been out there at times, and it's difficult because even last week they were running up to get the score against the Commanders and 0 targets. The week before against the Rams, 0 targets. He had 1 catch for 11 yards against the Packers. So maybe that's enough at 2,200 if this game goes under as I'm expecting it to. And if you're talking about 24-10 or 24-17 game, then doing kind of anything can make a difference. But yeah, I think I'm more likely to take punts on the Chiefs sides of things than I am on the Eagles side of things, because the Eagles just feel so much more condensed and like we know where everything goes.
Yeah, and everything feels a little bit expensive over on this Eagles side. I quite like Devonta Smith. You highlighted some of the stats earlier.
Yeah,
I think at 4,400, it's not outrageous in terms of pricing. I think that's certainly someone that we try and sneak in where I can. But yeah, it's basically a Barkley captain, plenty of Goddard, a little bit of Devonta Smith, and then the rest I really want on the Chiefs side. I don't love Hurts and I don't love AJ Brown, just because I feel like there's a lot of risk there without much guarantee. And at the price they are, I think there's plenty of better options.
Yeah, as Huhaim says in the chat, and if you're playing on FanDuel or DraftKings somewhere where you've got defense in the mix as well, I can definitely get on board with the defensive KC touchdown. I also think that, you look at the special teams there, the Chiefs had some nice punt returns, kick returns. I'd definitely be willing to lean into those kind of ideas a little bit on those platforms. Here on Fantasy Game Day, without the defense, I think, you can just kind of look at it and go, well, the defensive scores, if they happen, they don't help anyone, but it would probably help the kind of game control narrative. So if you believe that that's going to be something that occurs, then lean into that and say, okay, well, what happens if this team now is controlling because they've scored points on defense?
Yeah, absolutely. I like the Chiefs' defense. I think there's potential. We know that Jalen Hurts is a little bit erratic, not afraid to put the ball on the ground occasionally. And that Chiefs kick return is kind of special and has always got a chance to blow one. I think there is no chance I'm touching the Eagles' defense. The Chiefs don't turn the ball over. They are stingy as hell with the ball. As good as this Eagles' defense is, I don't see a world where the Eagles defense is going to get enough fancy points to get anywhere near any sort of lineup.
Yeah, I mean, it is worth pointing out that in the 4 Super Bowls Mahomes has played in, he's had 5 interceptions and 5 fumbles in those games, which feels like quite a lot, but he always makes up for it. It's not like those are pick sixes or fumbles turned into touchdowns. So, yeah, I think, you're talking about getting a point, 2 points out of a play like that, as opposed to getting 8, 9 points out of them.
I also think that there's a difference in game plan in terms of a lot of those Super Bowls. Teams are almost daring Mahomes to push the ball downfield and stuff like that. This Eagles defense is going to be sit deep and rally and tackle, and I just don't think that conveys itself to high turnover, those point scoring plays for the Eagles defense. So, yeah, I like that stat. I see it, but I'm not sure I see it in this matchup. But that concludes it, Tom. The game day preview, the Super Bowl preview in the books, our final one for the season. There is nothing left but to leave you with the best of luck. And remember, if you are entering that lineup over on Fantasy Game Day, they've got a £3 entry and a £10 entry on the ballers. Use that code TFS23 to get that free second entry when you sign up and you deposit and enter your first lineup. Let's just pray, Tom, for a good game, because I don't want another boring Super Bowl.